This is Five Eyes again. SvS is coming up this weekend, so I thought it'd be useful to do a couple of videos on how to attack. And the first one I'm going to do is on attacking on our own server. So the next one will be basically going to the enemy server and what to do there, but there is a level of risk going obviously to the other server, more so than attacking on your own server. So it's usual that I will just attack mainly anyway on our own server, as long as there's people coming over there. But yeah, I'm not going to do this while it's a live SvS because it's too complicated and it'll get in the way of me trying to attack. So I'm going to just give some examples and hopefully it'll kind of work in terms of understanding what I'm talking about. But the first step once it's actually SvS is to find out who's come across to our server. So to do that, you go to the server war section, which is usually a bit further up when it's actually server war, and then you go to ranking of enemy server, alliance power ranking, and then you can go into whichever alliance you want to look around at. So usually that will be the top 10 biggest alliances, because they're the more likely to come across. So let's just start with the first and largest alliance. So they've got plenty of members, and the way it will work, wow, they've got a lot. So I usually just scroll through them until I see that one of them is on our server. So what you can do to see if they're on our server is you'll have these, you see the little circle around here. So you've got those little gold cross swords by that person's name, and that means they're on our server. So that's how, while it's not SvS at the moment, so that none of them are going to be, but when SvS has started, then if any of them come onto our server, and you can refresh it as well like that, and then it will come up with who's on our server. So let's just say, for example, you're looking, because you can see what people's power levels are, but so you know whether you're likely to be able to attack somebody. So obviously if this guy comes over, he's 4.8 billion, he's not going to be really somebody I'm going to be worried about attacking, so I'm not going to necessarily track him unless I want to flag a warning to the rest of the server or the alliance or somebody else who could potentially hit him on either AC or world chat. So that's the only real time that I'd go for, basically put across, try and track him and put across his details. But if I saw somebody say this guy, so he's 170 million, I know I can easily take that out, so I could, I would track him. So the steps to do that are, I mean, before actually even you do this, I would always recommend that you check when you're first starting to sort of get in to set yourself to attack somebody or you just get online and you want to know what the situation is. Always have a good look at everybody through all of the sort of top alliances, just to check who's actually on the server at the time, because then you know who's jumping to and fro, who's sort of staying on our server, and therefore you know whether there's any big threats. So if there's that, like I said before, that 4.8 billion player, if he's on our server, then I might want to find out where he is, because I want to be mindful that I don't want to get hit by him. So, and I also want to know whether anybody who comes across could be reinforced. So there might be somebody who's like this guy, 170 million, but if there's the 5 billion guy on here on the server as well, then there's a chance he might be reinforced, and I wouldn't necessarily know about it. So you need to keep a good eye on what's happening and who's moving back and forth, because then you know who could be a realistic target and who could be reinforced and therefore a trap. So that's why it's always a good idea to check the sort of top 5 to 10 alliances when you first log on, to make sure that you know what the state of play is. Well, let's assume that the only person on our server from this alliance is this guy. Then I would go to detail, locate coordinates, and then use the arrest warrant to track where he is on our server. So I'll give you a bit of an example here. So, because I can't actually track people on different servers than us at the moment, but what I will usually do, I'm going to use these people because they're dead keeps as examples. So if I track him, then the first thing I'm going to do, because he may well be, there's three things that could be happening. He could be under a red bubble because he's under his sort of 5-minute just ported over shield. He could be just like this keep, except obviously he'd be a black keep because he's on an enemy server. But he could have no bubble and he could just be sitting there, in which case I'm probably going to keep an eye on him, but I'm not going to do anything yet because he might just be ghosting and sat there. The other alternative, he could be actually attacking someone, in which case I'm going to try and make some quick decisions to try and get his troops when they return to his keep. So those are the three sort of choices. If he's attacking, then you're going to want to attack, but let's assume he's under a red bubble for the moment. Then the very first thing I'm going to do is quickly, before he ports, click on him, click detail, and then click in the top right hand corner and block him. This one's already blocked, so that's why it's telling me to unblock, but I would block him first off because then he's on my blocked list, and that means that it's much easier for me to use an arrest warrant. So that's the most important thing. If he's still sat there, I'll probably bookmark him as well, just in case he's one of those people that effectively gets, sorry, what am I doing? But yeah, just in case he's one of those people that just sits there and stays doing nothing for ages, then I've got him bookmarked so I can go back to him and look for some other targets in the meantime. So those are the sort of very first things that I'll do, but you must make sure you block him, because then what I will usually do if he's sat under a red bubble, I'm aware that he's probably waiting to attack someone, so he's going to port unless he's already ported after his initial random port onto the server. He's going to do something, so he's either going to attack or he's going to port somewhere else. So I will have it literally at this screen here, because the most important thing when you're trying to attack somebody is speed, and especially when you're trying to track somebody. So I will click on this, and as soon as I see him disappear, I can click on Friends, Blacklist, and then straight on him here, and I can then track him straight away. So if you can do that and almost get you in the habit of where the buttons are actually on the screen, then it makes porting a lot quicker to track them. So literally I know that the next button from Friends is around about here, just under the gems, which sounds a little bit OTT, but it does make a little bit of difference. So if you click on Friends, it's there, and you know what you're doing, and you can just go straight through it. So that's how you can, when you know the layout of the buttons and you've done this quite a lot, then it's quite easy to do it really quick and track someone within a couple of seconds of them porting away. So let's say that you've tracked somebody and they're attacking a nearby keep, or they're attacking a resource tile, something like that. Then there's two things that there's different ways that you can port or even just attack straight away from where you are already in your hive. But there's several choices. So if you port right next to somebody, then yes, it's not very far for you to attack. And if you don't have any march speed ups, then that might be your only option. But there's quite a few negatives to this. So one is that once you port, he knows that you're there. So he's aware that he's going to get attacked. So if his troops are coming back already, then he might speed them up and port away. He might basically be able to, because he might check what level you are, and you might be thinking, well, he's only got those troops going out, and you might think you can just attack his march because he's probably ghosting the rest. He might not be, so he might unghost, and then you hit him, and he's a lot bigger than you were expecting. So, and you end up losing the attack. So there's a couple of reasons there, but there's also, if there is anybody else on the server, or there's anybody else watching from the other server, they can see straight away, because they might be watching their fellow alliance member, and they might be ready to port and hit somebody if they're going to attack. So as soon as you do that, you're giving them a few seconds before you even attack to port over to the server and have a go at you back. So yeah, there's a couple of disadvantages there already. The other one is that if he's just ghosting and you port right next to him, he might be waiting for you to attack, so he might keep ghosting. But as soon as you've finished your attack on his city, he could unghost his march and hit you back, and then you're in trouble, because yeah, you probably haven't had time to ghost because you've just literally ported and hit, and you may not have been expecting to take a hit, so you get wiped out. And some keeps are built really cleverly to work that way. And he could also just port away as well, just a little bit to one side. Your march misses, and then he hits you straight away. And I had that happen to me once, although I wasn't ported right next to somebody, but it was actually a really clever move, where he wasn't ghosting, and he was just waiting for somebody to attack him. He then port right next to them and hit them when they hadn't ghosted. So those are the sort of pitfalls of porting right next to somebody. So what I do is, well, usually you want to port out of their sort of line of sight. So if you think you're sat there, you want to port somewhere over here, up here, or basically anywhere outside of their field of view. Again, if you attack somebody from the hive, there might be people watching the hive, and particularly if you do this quite a lot during SvS, people might become wise to it, and then they will try and hit you. So that's why I prefer to always port near somebody when they're doing this. It does take a little bit of extra time, because obviously you've got to, when you've just tracked somebody, all the screen isn't necessarily loaded up. So I've had a few frustrating moments where you think, right, I'm going to port here, and then suddenly a monster pops up which hadn't loaded up because you've only just tracked them, and so the screen's still almost loading a bit. So it can get frustrating when that happens, but it's a lot safer for you because nobody can see you. So if somebody else is watching, they're not going to necessarily see where you are, and if they're watching, they're not going to be able to see where you are when you're porting over there. And because you're porting and hitting straight away as well, it just gives, there's a lot less chance of you actually being hit when you're trying to attack them. The other benefit of porting a sort of fairly close but reasonable distance from them is that you can control your time at the timing of your hit better. So if their troops are coming back, you know, across, let's say from this tile, then you can see the pace at which they're coming back, and you can time the attack to hit pretty much just when their troops get back. And it's a lot easier to do that when you're basically just a screen's width away, because you know it's going to take maybe 4 quick hits with the march speed up. So that's what I would usually do, about 4 quick hits with the speed march up, the march speed up, and you would then hit them. So that's the way I would usually do it. Also though, with that, is that anything you do, people could be watching, and certainly what I do is I watch what people do. So even if I don't actually get to attack them, I'll see what strategies they're using. So I don't want the same to happen to me. So I'm not always going to port in the same place. So if I was ported here one time to attack somebody, I'll port somewhere else. I'll port to the side, or I'll port above, and mix it up so that nobody can actually have a good idea of where you might be, and they can't set a trap in that way because they don't. It's all about reducing your chances of getting hit. So I like to try and dictate my attacking on my own terms, so that, yeah, I know that I can take this guy out, so I know I'll win that battle, but I also don't want to get hit and give away a load of points. So this is my way of trying to improve my sort of net score by avoiding any potential, well, not any potential risk, but most of the risk of getting hit. So those are the sort of that's really the way I would do it. So the other thing is that if they're ghosted and they just sat there and not doing anything, then there's not really much point in porting near to them. I wouldn't port to them unless they've actually got troops out, because you're just giving yourself away. So if I ported over here and he's just sat there ghosting, been doing it for 10 minutes, he's probably going to spot where I am. So it gives away my location. So I'd only port once their troops have actually left their keep, for that reason. So that's a couple. That's sort of the way I would attack somebody. You've also got to think about the different types of people that will come over in terms of how they actually attack. So some people will just port, take maybe wait a while, maybe wait 10-15 minutes. They might just be waiting for a target to come up. So it might not be something that you can really predict, but they might just sit there for ages, which can get boring. So you need to have a lot of patience and just sit there and watch them, or you may just decide to leave them. And like I say, I bookmark them and then keep coming back frequently to see whether they've done anything. And the other ones that are quite difficult to catch are the ones that just keep porting, hitting, and then leaving straight away, because unless you're exceptionally quick, it is difficult to catch those guys out. But even if you fail, and quite often you will, particularly with those types of people, you get to learn about the way that they do things. So, the next time they come on the server, you're ready. You're ready basically to track them and then try and hit them quick. And it might be that you're better to do that from distance. So you might just port into a sort of random location, and just as soon as you track them, hit them straight away. I still go with the porting close to them, or close-ish to them method, just because I feel like that's best for me. But it might be better for actually catching some of these people that you do it that way, that you just attack from wherever you're located rather than trying to port as well, because that does take extra time, which when you've got people moving that quickly isn't always possible. So, but you can catch those people. But the way I see it is that just because you don't hit somebody and they end up going back to the server and you miss them, I don't really get frustrated about it, because you've learned how they attack, and once you know how somebody attacks, then you know how to track them and what to look for. So it does make it easier in some senses. And I did exactly the same thing with a guy last SvS. Oops, wrong one. This guy, so I tracked him on two occasions where I was jumping between about 4 different places. Then he'd go back, and then eventually he came back again, and he was a bit slow. I was quicker at tracking him, and I got him. And so, yeah, you can make it even eventually, even if you do fail the first few times. And it does take a while to get. I always find the start of SvS is quite tricky, because you don't know anything about how the other people play, so you end up mistiming attacks, or just have a lot of failures to start with. But then once you get hit somebody once, then you start getting a lot more hits. So it's don't get too frustrated from initial sort of failures. I'm trying to think whether there's any other there's plenty of types of different types of people who hit. Some people hit from quite a long distance as well, and then they'll literally hit from distance really quickly, and then they'll speed their troops back as well, and then just port out. But usually in those cases, they're not actually ghosting, so it is a risk for them that if they get spotted quickly, you can hit them while our troops are out, get all their troops, while they're sort of targeting somebody from distance, and they're just trying to speed their troops back. And again, that's something you learn from just watching people. I've got hit people in that way as well, from them hitting from distance and speeding back, because sometimes you might not be expecting them to do that, and certainly the first time somebody does that, you're kind of expecting their troops will come back slowly. But if they speed them back straight away, it surprises you, and then they get away with it. But the next time they come over, you should be wise to it. So you can, as soon as they've hit the other person, or they're about to hit, that's when I'll literally start my attacking process. So I'll be, let's just say he's just attacked, and I can see that his march has stopped because it's hitting the keep. So I will literally go on to him straight away, hit, and then march, and then speed up my march straight away to hit him. And either I'll get troops that he's already just got in his keep, or I'll get his troops returning as well. So there's different ways that people might attack. The worst one actually is the one where they attack from distance, and then it's like a half an hour march back, and they just do it slowly, and then at one point they will just speed them back. So you'd have to be watching it for the full, 15-20 minutes, and then quite often I've had it where I've been watching a march, and then all of a sudden the game just glitches, or you just go back to look at their keep and the troops are already back, and you don't even understand what's happened. So yeah, those ones are probably the most frustrating. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it in terms of how I would attack, and what other people might do. There's always differences, and people may also change up what they're doing as well, depending on what they're trying to hit. So it does vary. But the most important thing I'd definitely say is don't port too close. Don't try and force port, particularly if there's people bigger on the other server who might hit you. Because if you're trying to force port, you've just got... I've hit loads of people before when they've been force porting on the enemy server, and yeah, they're just leaving themselves as an open goal to be hit. So there's no point doing that. Get a big keep who's not going to be soloed to do that sort of thing. And yeah, just keep an eye out always for what's going on your server. So always be mindful of who is coming to and fro from the server, and if you've got one big person on the server, then you need to be, who could wipe you out, then you need to just be really wary that they could be re-inning somebody if they're from the same alliance, or even if they're from a different alliance. It might be somebody that somebody here might have told that big guy that they're going to be over there, so you might track them and be waiting for people to port next to them or attack them, and you can get hit that way. So yeah, just always be mindful of that, because that's when you can get either burned or you lose an attack because somebody's reinforced. But what I've told you in terms of porting it out of the line of sight will usually reduce the risk of that happening, in terms of you being hit by a big who's lining up or watching somebody from another alliance. And I think that's pretty much it. The only other thing actually is, if you do have somebody who's got a very big player from the same alliance on our server, then if they've ported and you've tracked them, you know they're not re-inned, because they can't port. They can't. The troops, the reinforcing troops, won't stay in somebody's keep once they've ported. So you know that you could then hit that guy because he's not reinforced. So as soon as somebody ports, you do know that you're kind of safe to hit them, as long as you track them quickly, obviously if you track them a couple of minutes later, you don't know what the situation is. But yeah, that's one thing. And probably the most important thing, when you've attacked, it's always a good idea to speed it up, not just because you can time this sort of attack well, but also because you want to reduce the time that your keep is unbubbled for. So as soon as it's you've finished your hit, then make sure you bubble as quickly as possible, and also make sure you've got some truce agreements as well, just to speed it up. You don't want to be having to buy truce agreements. It depends which way you do it. This way is a bit easier to do it, but if you're going through the menu and then selecting it and you find there's nothing there, then that can be a bit of a worrying moment. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything. I appreciate it's a lot of me waffling, but that's how I sort of think about attacking on our own server and how I do it. And I'll go through in another video about what I do on an enemy server. But hopefully that's helped. If you've got any questions, ask away in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.